I would like to welcome and thank all of you for attending this event today. And before we start our discussion, I would like to say a few words about Al-Hawar Center. The word Al-Hawar means dialogue in English. Al-Hawar Center was established in 1994 as an independent forum for dialogue among various members of the Arab community. The goals include finding common ground within our community, as well as bringing about greater mutual understanding between the Arab community and the American society at large. Al-Hawar Center is not affiliated with any country, religion, organization, political party, or ideology. Rather, it provides a forum for a respectful dialogue that's open to all opinions. So I ask everyone here to support this center and encourage others to subscribe and be involved in this great cultural experiment of open, useful dialogue. You can find the subscription coupons beside the refreshment table. Al-Hawar Center has hosted so far 1,030 events over the last 22 years. We have had many events about politics and culture and subjects related to religion, but this evening is our first event about dependence on oil revenues, and our speaker tonight is Dr. Chakib Khelil, former Minister of Energy and Mines in Algeria, who will talk about what do the oil-rich Arab countries need to do to overcome their dependence on oil revenues. We are happy to have Dr. Chakib Khelil with us tonight. Dr. Khelil has his PhD degree in petroleum engineering from Texas A&M University in 1968. After a bachelor and master degree in mining and petroleum engineering from Ohio State University in 1964 and 1965. He worked for Phillips Petroleum and Shell in Oklahoma, then as a petroleum engineering consultant with D.R. McCord and Associates in Dallas, Texas. He returned to Algeria as president of joint venture between Sonatrach and Core Laboratories of Dallas, Texas, in petroleum engineering in 1971. Became first head of petroleum department of Sonatrach in Algeria after the oil nationalization in February of 1971. He became technical advisor in the presidency of the Republic under President Boumediene in 1973. He was put in charge in 1975 by then Minister of Energy and Mines for developing a 30-year plan for valorization of hydrocarbons in Algeria and seeking financing for its implementation. This plan was put in effect in 1979. He became energy advisor to President Bouteflika in November 1999, and in December of the same year, he became the Energy and Mines Minister until May 2010. He put in charge of the nuclear sector and water desalination in Algeria during his tenure, put in place reforms in the mining, electricity, and hydrocarbon sectors, and solved the water crisis in Algeria. He was president of OPEC twice, once in 2001 and the other in 2008. Initiated major decisions for OPEC in those years to offset declines in international oil prices. After May 2010, he became an international consultant for governments and companies. Please join me welcoming our speaker, Dr. Chakib Khelil.
Thank you, Mr. Shinnawi. I'd like to thank for inviting me. This is the first time I attend your meetings.
Not the last time.
I hope it's not the last time. So I welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to this talk on how we can get out of oil dependence in those Arab countries that are highly dependent. It's a complicated topic, but I'd like to maybe make it, what is this gas is sold in dollars, or oil is sold in dollars. So it led to the appreciation of the local currency in Holland. And basically it made it cheaper to import goods and services from outside and more expensive to export. And this led to the Dutch disease, which means the gas sector overwhelmed the other sectors of the economy and basically, in a way, killed off the other sectors. And that's why it's called the Dutch disease. Even when we are talking about oil dependence from Arab countries, we still call it the Dutch disease. So, but lots of countries are also dependent on other minerals or other products. So they still are liable to be dependent on those minerals. For example, Morocco is highly dependent on phosphate export. Not too many people know that. Or Chile, for example, is highly dependent on export of copper. It's one of the largest producers of copper. So, or some countries are highly dependent on export of bananas, or highly dependent on export on cocoa, or coffee. So you have the same issue that you end up receiving high revenues, especially when the price of the commodity or the price of the product is high, and this leads to the appreciation of the local currency and also killing off the other sectors. So what I want to say is that it's not applying only to oil, it could apply to gas, like in the case of Holland, it applies to copper, it applies when that mineral or that product overwhelms the economy. So basically I explained that the high appreciation of the local currency leads to killing off exports from that country. It makes it easier to import to the country. If you combine that with countries, especially Arab countries, and you can name any one of them, they subsidize lots of the goods and services, especially the consuming goods and services. And when they subsidize those goods and services through pricing, which means they make the gasoline cheaper, they make milk cheaper, so it could be more affordable to people. It makes electricity cheaper, it makes natural gas cheaper, like in Algeria. It makes even housing cheaper. So basically the government subsidizes through the prices, okay, not specific part of the population, but through prices, which means everybody among the population benefits from the subsidy. So because the government subsidizes, consequently what you end up with is that the subsidy amount has a big effect on the budget, because it makes it's a big component of the budget of the government. And also it would make a big component of the foreign currency, because you're going to need foreign currency to buy the milk, for example, to import the milk to supply the population that is subsidized. And because at the same time the population is increasing, because you have increasing population, the demand of the population for these products and that are subsidized increases with time. So basically over time, you're going to have an increasing demand for supplying these subsidies to the people. So imagine then when you have then a lowering of an oil price, okay? So if you have a lowering of oil price, then the government income is lower. So the government doesn't have enough in the budget to cover both the subsidies and carry out the investment program. So which means that when the oil price decreases also, you have the reverse effect that I mentioned initially when you have the oil price increase. When you have the oil price decreasing, you have a depreciation of the local currency. And the depreciation of the local currency creates an inflation, which means the goods, the local goods and so forth, the products in the local market, increases. And basically the impact is going to be harder on the poor. Why the poor? Because the poor usually have a fixed income, okay? While the richer class, can, for example, convert their local currency in the foreign currency and keep their purchasing power. Especially if there is, of course, a foreign currency market, And there's always a foreign currency market, in our countries, even if it's just in the informal market. So if you have the poor, in that case, with the oil price decreasing, losing the purchasing power, and at the same time, the government cannot maintain, the subsidies to the oil, to all of the population, then you have this recipe for social and political upheaval, like what's happening in Venezuela. So Venezuela is living through this nightmare where, they subsidize everybody, but they don't have really the income even to maintain the subsidies. So this is the danger, of oil is going to be harder on the poor. Why the poor? Because the poor usually have a fixed income, okay? While the richer class, can, for example, convert their local currency in the foreign currency and keep their purchasing power. Especially if there is, of course, a foreign currency market, And there's always a foreign currency market, in our countries, even if it's just in the informal market. So if you have the poor, in that case, with the oil price decreasing, losing the purchasing power, and at the same time, the government cannot maintain, the subsidies to the oil, to all of the population, then you have this recipe for social and political upheaval, like what's happening in Venezuela. So Venezuela is living through this nightmare where, they subsidize everybody, but they don't have really the income even to maintain the subsidies. So this is the danger, of oil, those people who you should be helping, which are the poor. At the same time, the other issue that you have is that when you are subsidizing goods and services, for example, milk or water, okay? Basically, you are not encouraging any investments for any private, I'm talking about private investments to produce those goods and services. So basically, the government is left to continue investing to supply those goods and services, which means the government, in a way, by continuing to subsidize, is forced to continue investments, to produce the electricity, the water, the housing, etc., etc. So you end up in a vicious, circle that it's very difficult to get out of, in those cases. And as the government is the major investor in most of these countries that we are talking about, the oil-dependent countries, basically when your oil price goes down, and you could imagine the subsidies, absorb more and more of the government revenues, the government has less and less money to invest on its own. So when you have prices declining, then you have a big dilemma for some of the countries. I'm not talking about all of the countries that have lots of money, like the Emirates or Malaysia, for example, do not have that situation. But those countries will have to go to, for example, loans. They have to get loans, or maybe they have to go and improve the investment, framework to attract, more investment in the country, because the government is not going to be able to maintain the investment in all of this, on all of the areas, including the areas I just mentioned a while ago. So this is just a summary about how our countries end up in this vicious circle of oil dependence. And my second part is going to be talking about, of course, the oil price. Basically, we know now that the oil price is not going to go back to the levels we have seen in the 2000s. When I was oil minister, we've seen some very high prices at up to 140, 170. Why? We're not going to see that. Because as the oil price is going toward the 50s, the $50 per barrel, basically we're going to have more oil produced by the US oil shale. I'm not going to go into the details why, but basically as the oil price goes over $50, then you're going to have, and that's what's happening right now. At the same time, if Trump, applies its tariff policy, on oil imports, or sanctions Iran, then it's going to help U.S. shale oil production. Okay, which means as the oil price goes up, you're going to have more U.S. oil shale production, which means it's going to apply pressure because pressure on prices to go down. At the same time, the demand, if you look at the other side, which is the demand, for large consuming countries like maybe China and India, it's going to be, the demand is going to increase, but it's going to be tempered by more efficient use in these countries, of oil. As a result of these two factors, the supply may overtake demand, and we're going to see the prices in the medium term remain in the level between $50 and $60. Now, if you look at longer terms, which is beyond 4 to 5 years, the oil price could go back to higher prices. Why? Because the production from OPEC and non-OPEC is limited. Sooner or later, it's going to get its maximum. It's going to reach its maximum. It's almost reached its maximum, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's Russia, so that's one. The oil demand in the world is continuing every year to add a demand of between 1 and 1.5 million barrels per day. So we have that increase, constantly, okay? And at the same time, lots of the big companies are not really investing, because they think oil price is going to be low in the medium term. They're not really investing in the long term. So we're going to end up beyond the medium term, most probably having oil prices, strengthen. But if we look at this situation, I think we can say definitely that these oil-dependent countries cannot continue to depend on this roller coaster, I call it, of oil prices going up and down, and every time facing, this situation. So we have to move out of this dependence. And it is very complicated, as you can imagine, socially and politically. Socially, because of the subsidies. And politically, because if you attack the subsidies issue, and you have, for example, to target the subsidy to those who need that subsidies, then you're going to end up with some issues, that can create
autocratic regimes succeeding in that, knowing that they rely on subsidies to gain political support. And then the other question is, since you're an Algerian minister and insider, what do you consider as the obstacles for building a free market amongst the countries of the Union of the Maghreb countries?
Yeah. Yeah, subsidies, of course. I mean, subsidies create their own stakeholders, like I said. I mean, whether you have autocratic or non-autocratic, it doesn't matter, who's in charge. I mean, you could have a democracy, like here, US. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, US, you have lots of subsidies. You know, when you pass a law in Congress, you know, what they are called pork barrel, you know, they put lots of things, you know, to help their region, so it's done. I mean, it's done in all of democracies. It's done, of course, in autocratic.
But it's not out of dependence. If you want to grow out of that situation where you're dependent on oil,
yeah,
you need.
So no, that's the second phase. I mean, I just wanted to say that you could have the subsidy situation in every case. I mean, you have it in France, you have it in Holland, you have it, of course, in our countries. But in developing countries, it's more difficult because your economy is not diversified. Okay, so to get out of it, you need to diversify. But to diversify, you need to get out of the subsidy through pricing, and it can be done. I mean, the World Bank has done lots of studies and have lots of cases where countries have been able to get out of price subsidies through prices. So you would focus on specific things. So when I was at the World Bank, we worked a lot on this, and we were very successful in carrying out some of these programs in Ecuador, Latin America, and so forth. But of course, you have to be careful when to do it and how to do it. Because if you don't do it the right way, you're going to have big backlash, you know, from people who are going to be losing. For example, in Algeria right now, if the government lowers, let's say, assistance to everybody, you're actually creating more pain for the poorest, because the poor already have less subsidy. Second, through inflation, they are losing power. So what I would recommend, that in a situation like this, I would help the poor even more. I would have a program through my budget. Even if I still subsidize everybody, I would start helping the poor even more, because that's where, you know, your problems may come out socially and then politically, you know, to come out. So that's how I do it.
But what are the chances of success? I mean,
Well,
I think in autocratic regimes there is that fear of that backlash, and therefore there is no political power.
Well, that fear exists in all regimes, I think. I mean, in France, they backtracked on lots of the, you know, of the student, for example, the subsidies when they had the students go out on the streets. I mean, you saw that on television. So they went out of it. So it frightens the social evil, frightens the politicians. It's evident. And they're going to be very careful, you know, in the implementation, you know, of programs of that sort.
So,
دكتور شكيب شكرا جزيلا على وجودك معنا اليوم.
What was the second one? Sorry, I didn't.
المغرب العربي. Why?
Well, I mean, the biggest issue now between Algeria, between Algeria and Morocco, you know, is this closing of the borders. I'm not going to go into who was responsible for what, because we're all responsible for that situation. And we would be better off economically if we had one community, an economic community with 100 million, rather than each one having 40. Tunisia, I think, has what, 10 million. So there's no doubt that would be better. So I am for it, and I am hoping that this could be resolved. That the situation, you know, the issues between Morocco and Algeria of opening the borders could be resolved. Who needs to do what? I don't know. Maybe Morocco should apologize first, because they issued the visa. They decided to stop the visas, you know, for issuing the visas for Algerians, and Algerians, of course, reacted by closing the borders. So they took the measure first, and maybe they need to do that. But I think both of them would gain by opening up to a single market. If not, all of us are working toward, you know, an African market. So sooner or later, we're going to be one big market anyway.